Well, today we're going to talk about an unpleasant subject, and that is what happens if your husband passes away. And it's unpleasant because, you plan for retirement, you plan to live together for a long time, but most often, you have to understand that the husband predeceases the wife, and the wife now becomes single. So what goes on? What happens next with your finances? Well, here's a couple of questions that are important for you to understand. Number one, about your expenses. How are they paid? Well, understand that when it comes to your expenses, just because your husband passes away doesn't mean that all of a sudden your expenses go down to 50% of what you were otherwise spending. Quite often they might go down a little bit because obviously there are some things that you are not spending money on, but there are other things that you are spending, that you will be spending money on. For example, your husband was probably doing a lot of work around the house. It was hanging this, mowing the grass, fixing this. Well, now your husband passes away, and now you have to pay somebody to do those things. So expenses you have to understand that they're not going to decrease by half. The other thing is, what about pensions? What happens to pensions? Well, it's very important that you make the right decision right before you start collecting the pension, because you can't fix the pension once you start collecting it. So whatever the husband picked at the beginning is what the wife will get when the husband passes away. And oftentimes that's where people make mistakes. So again, it's important to get a good idea of what will happen to that pension in case the husband predeceases the wife. The other thing is, and the same subject, is Social Security. Understand that your husband and the wife are collecting Social Security. What happens when the husband passes away is that the wife remains with the highest of the two. So actually one will go away. So if the husband was collecting the higher benefit than the wife, then the wife's Social Security check will go away, and she will remain with her spousal benefit, or her widow benefit will be what her husband was collecting. So understand that. And another important thing to understand, what happens to IRAs and 401ks? Well, those are pretty important, and those are pretty easy. If you, the wife, are named as the beneficiary, then obviously you inherit those IRAs and 401ks. But here's something that's tricky. If your husband has a 401k, oftentimes what is allowed in 401ks is not allowed by the employer to be done in the 401k. So sometimes those become a little trickier. Now, the money is always yours, but how you take it out is the issue of the timing and so on and so forth. So these are just a few to think out loud. Always discuss this with your financial advisor. Always be prepared for these things to happen. And in case you don't have a financial advisor, well, here I am. So ask away. I'll see you next time on Financial QB TV.